Hello everyone, welcome to the first Fusion 360 tutorial. I'm Kevin Elkhoury, and I'll be helping Madison for the next few weeks of this course where we will be teaching the ins and outs of Fusion 360. We're going to start off by discussing what type of software Fusion 360 is, how to be able to use the basis of it, how to make 2D designs, and then how to turn those 2D designs into 3D models. So, starting off, what type of software is Fusion 360? What is this thing? Fusion 360 is what we call a CAD software, with CAD standing for computer-aided design. Essentially, it's a software that just lets you make 3D models that you'd then be able to export to 3D print or CNC mill. Fusion 360, though, is a bit special of a CAD software in that it incorporates what's called parametric design. Parametric design is the basis that we can put preset parameters to reference. For example, I can make a box with a height of 20 inches, then reference everything to that height at 20 inches. For example, I could say the width is half of the height. Then by me simply at the end scaling down to 20 inches to 10 inches, everything would scale accordingly. This lets you scale your images, your models how you please by changing very few parameters. Now, there's a variety of CAD softwares out there. Not all of them incorporate this parametric design. You have softwares that are used for more artistic purposes, such as Blender. You have more casual softwares, such as Tinkercad, that you probably used for the 3D printer tutorial. And then you have more high-end engineering softwares, such as Fusion 360 and SolidWorks. Today and for the rest of the course, we'll be going through using Fusion 360. However, the skills you use in the software will be easily convertible into any of the other softwares named. Starting off, how do we actually use this software? Well, the first thing I want us to look at is right here in the top right corner, the View tool. This is something that you will end up using reflexively, and as such, it's very important for you to get used to it early on. First of all, if you go through it, you could look at your design in different ways. You could see the pivot circle in the middle turning around. However, we don't actually see anything else than white around it, as we don't actually have our design. Right here, if it wasn't clicked already, you could turn on the view of the origin by turning on this eye. And here we could at least look around the XY plane. In addition to that, I can use the pan tool down here to pan my view to see it in different ways. Throughout the tutorial, you'll be expected to just reflexively be able to manipulate your image and move around to have the proper view. For everyone, the proper view might not be the same thing. Some people might prefer viewing it at a completely top angle, which you could simply click on the cube to view. Some people might prefer it more at this sideways angle. Some people might just want a sort of mix at a diagonal angle. Whatever is most comfortable for you with whatever image you're designing is what you should just end up using. Don't try breaking your neck if you don't have a good view. Just spend a second, change your view, and you're good to go. I'm spending some time talking about this, though it is intuitive, just to make it clear that a lot of times you might be forgetting to change your view, and it's important just to go and do it, since I won't be telling you guys to do so throughout the tutorials, especially in the later on ones. Alright. Now we're going to be talking about these settings in the top left corner. We're going to go through them very briefly. Right here, we have this thing that says unsaved. This is discussing a component. A component is essentially one piece of our 3D model. Right now, there's nothing in this component. But if I wanted to, I could right-click and press New Component to then select something to make a new component out of. And I can see it right here. Now, this isn't necessary for right now, as we're not actually interested in making a multi-component part. Rather, we're just going to be working on the basics. Following that, underneath, there's document settings. Right here, we can set the default units that we'll be using for the dimensions of our project. I'm going to stick to millimeters, since it's probably the best one to be using, but if you're more comfortable in inches or centimeters, feel free to switch. Though I'll probably be sticking to a default of millimeters for all the projects. So if you're trying to match my dimensions perfectly, then you should probably stick to millimeters as well. Following that, we have named views. Named views are just predefined views that we can access here on the view cube. It's possible to add additional views for us to use. though this isn't incredibly important until we have much more complex designs. Following that, there's the origin, where if you click right here, you can see every origin plane available. X plane, Y plane, Z plane, then the XY plane, XZ plane, and YZ plane. And, of course, your origin in the middle. And there we go. Now that we have this set up and established, we're going to actually make our first design in Fusion 360. So, what's different about Fusion 360 and the idea of sculpting is that when we're working in Fusion 360, we actually want to be thinking about our designs in a 2D sense. We want to take a complex 3D design, break it down into multiple 2D components that can be simply pulled up, or as the word that we're going to be using in Fusion 360 is extruded, in order to make a complex 3D design. And we're going to do it right here. What we're going to do is we're going to click right here on this plane. We're going to right click on it and click on the Create Sketch button. Now we're into sketching tools. As you can see up here, there's a wide variety of sketch tools that you'll be able to use, from making basic lines, rectangles, different types of rectangles depending on how you want to define it, circles, arcs, polygons, and so forth. In addition, there's modifying tools over here that you'll be able to use to create a fillet, which is like an arc or a curve to some sort of sketch that you've made. The trim tool, which will let you cut down lines to the next intersection, which can help you clean up designs. Extend, break, you could sketch it, you'll be able to make an offset of your design, and so forth. We're going to go through just very basically right here. We're going to be making a center diameter circle. If you hover it over it, you can see there's the shortcut C to do so. I'm just going to click right here though. And we want to define this by something. We need to put a base point of reference. Right now, there is no actual references on our sketch, except for right here being the origin. The origin is what's called a defined point. A defined point can't be moved. The origin will always be at the coordinates 0, 0. And by us then making the circle, it is now defined by its center being the origin. So now we can move our circle around like this, but we can't actually move our circle left and right or in the XY direction, simply because it is defined by its center being the origin. Its radius, though, is still completely up to us. We're going to talk later about defining this, but that's not a concern for right now. So I can make a circle like this if I please. I can then decide, I want a rectangle attached to my circle right here, with this rectangle being defined by one of its points being connected to the circle. If we try moving it around like this, we'll be able to. Following that, we're going to be discussing very quickly the line tool. Imagine I just want an arbitrary line that will go from this end of the rectangle, connecting also down to the circle. Once again, it is defined, so I can't get rid of those connections, but the image will scale accordingly as long as those constraints are met. All right, we made the sketch design. I'm now going to ask you guys simply pause the video and just have some fun using these sketch tools up here. All right, now that you've learned the basics and are a bit comfortable in using these sketch tools, playing around, making yourself a basic image, we're going to go through and actually turning this 2D sketch into a 3D image. And we're going to be going through the extrude tool for this. To access the extrude tool, we're going to be using the shortcut on our keyboard E. By clicking E, it will pop up right here what's called extrude. Now, here it's going to ask us select the profile. Essentially, what do we want to extrude? What do we want to pull up? Well, I'm going to select all three of these in our line over here. Next up, we need to say the distance, which is defined by the extent here. We'll worry about the different choices here later. But we want to say how far do we want to extend it up? How tall do we want this shape to be? Let's set it to 20 millimeters. So here, by clicking here, you can delete our 0, 0, type in 20. And now we have a 20 millimeter extrusion of our 2D sketch we just made. This isn't particularly useful of a sketch, but it It shows just the fundamentals. Of course, you can already see from here that any sketch you make, you could turn into an extruded 3D. But that's not enough to make complex 3D shapes. Many times 3D shapes are many, if not hundreds, of 2D sketches built up extruded on one another. Well, imagine now that we want to add a shape on top of this shape we just made. We'd be able to right-click this plane, just as we right-clicked the plane at the beginning, and say that we want to make a sketch on this plane. All right. Now I can create for myself a ellipse, let's say. We're going to make it a overall slot ellipse. Define it by the origin. Define it as such. Once again, its only definition is the origin, and it must intersect at that midpoint there. However, past that, I can move it how I please. All right. Now that we got this weird looking shape set up, I can simply use the extrude tool using E once again, select this one sketch, and say I want to pull it up by 20 millimeters again. And there we go. Now you're capable of making sketches on top of sketches to make more complex components. This will be the end of the first video. I highly recommend that you guys spend some time playing around, getting comfortable in using the sketch tools, using the view cube to view your sketch at different angles, and making sketches on top of sketches to be making these more complex 3D components. Before moving on to the next video, where we will be discussing how to actually define the shapes that we are making.